Hey guys, Kurt Hughes here with Ignite Baseball. I wanted to take a second to just kind of reflect on the year that we've had with the World Series coming up. I wanted to, just kind of talk about like the state of hitting and where everything is going, and just how excited I am about the future that we have in front of us. So, if you guys kind of don't know about what was happening, many years back with like Ted Williams and some of the things that he was preaching and teaching, like a lot of those things are the things that like I'm saying now, and that like a lot of smart Major League Baseball players that are kind of talking about, like wanting to hit the ball in the air, so that way they can like do more damage on their swings. That's the things that Williams was talking about like years and years and years ago. That around the same time, maybe like a little after, there was a guy, Charlie Lau, who was teaching things that were like kind of polar opposite to that. He was, the kind of like linear hitting guy. He was talking about how, guys should really like try to swing down to be really short to like the contact point. And it's funny because we kind of had this option where we could go with what a guy like Ted Williams was saying in like this direction and really try to get on plane with the pitch, drive the ball, over the shift from his perspective, because the shift was kind of like the thing that got in Williams' way. They basically invented the shift for him because he was such a pull hitter. But regardless, they were talking about how he wanted to hit the ball over the shift and get his bat on plane with the pitch, so that way you have the greatest chance of success of actually hitting the ball. So we had the choice of kind of going that way, or we had the choice of kind of going the way that Charlie Lau was talking about, which was being like really, really short to contact, which resulted in like, a downward swing. And that was kind of like the birth of like, linear versus rotational hitting. I'm not like a crazy like baseball historian, so if anyone wants to like correct me on like exactly like how that started, like you're welcome to, but that's kind of like the textbook version of how that happened, right? So we had those two paths, and miraculously the majority of people ended up picking Charlie Lau's path, which is crazy to me because now we kind of live in a society where like our best pro athletes, like they say something and we as a public can consume it right away because of social media. So a lot of times when they say something about like the way that they train, or how they like to go about like doing their swing, or if you're like a football player, like how you throw or something like that, we as the public digest it and we're like, okay, great, that's gospel because this guy's good, he says this, therefore I should do this because that's how he got here, right? And I don't necessarily think that like line of logic is 100% true, but what I do think is that that's generally how the public consumes things. So we were at a time when Ted Williams is one of the best hitters of all time. He still is one of the best hitters of all time, but like when he was actually like in it and still alive, he said something and the public ended up taking like Charlie Lau's path, which looking back, like it's just a crazy phenomenon. But we kind of notice now, if we look back like historically, when it comes to like thought leadership on anything, usually it's not the person that makes the most sense that the public kind of like grasps onto and takes their ideas. It's the person who is the loudest in the room and also the most charismatic. So I can't speak for the exact Charlie Lau versus Ted Williams or like how any of that stuff played out, but what I can say is that Charlie Lau certainly was a pretty loud person in the room, put out like a bunch of books just on, like hitting overall. Kaylee, hey, Kaylee, come on. Sorry, I'm outside with my dog. So he put out a bunch of books with regard to like, hitting and everything. And so he kind of became like considered to be like, the really smart guy when it came to hitting. And that didn't necessarily mean that his content really made a whole lot of sense. It just meant that he was like the only person that was really saying a whole lot. Now, Ted Williams' Science of Hitting, obviously that book exists. It's an amazing book. Highly recommend you read it. But for whatever reason, most people took the other path, like the let's swing down, be short to contact, as the path, right? But then now we're in like this current environment, and StatCast is this big thing. If you don't know what StatCast is, I highly recommend just Google it. But basically, it uses like high-speed cameras to be able to track everything that goes on in the baseball field, how hard every throw is, how hard every hit is, what angle it's hit at, how far it went, stuff like that. So that way you can kind of quantify, what a player's doing, like with their body, and what that results in an actual like real, quantifiable, trackable data. So Statcast has really done a lot of really, really good stuff to kind of show that whatever, the Charlie Lau methodology of teaching, it's not really lining up with what generates the best results, which is why you've seen like this total like pivot of a lot of like the best players in baseball to doing things that give them the best Statcast data, because really that's how people get paid is by putting up numbers. Like a lot of the MVP voting now is like based on like wins above replacement, which 15 years ago I don't even think was a stat. You can correct me on that if I'm wrong. I could be a little bit off on that, but at the end of the day, stats, like new stats come up every single day, and when those new stats come up, they are able to quantify like a different part of the game. And if that given stat has like a ton of value, then a player's like, well, like I need to be able to like make my game so that way it shows the stats, if that's what front offices are looking for, to be able to like sign a big contract, or even just like make it into the bigs or into like minor leagues. So if you can look at a player and you can say that player quantifiably has more value than this player, then the player that has more value most of the time is going to be the one that gets picked, which is basically what that movie Moneyball was about. So if you haven't seen that, definitely check it out. But that's essentially how the game is kind of like evolved, and I'm really excited because this is kind of similar to like what happened to me like in my path. So when I was in college, I realized that I was a biology and chemistry major, so I was taking like some basic physics class. So I'm not trying to say that I was like super smart when it comes to physics, but I was taking like physics 1 and physics 2, and it's basically just like Newtonian physics, which is the stuff you learn like in high school, just like a little bit more complex version of that. So just basic like force is equal to mass times acceleration, like coefficient of static friction, coefficient of kinetic friction, stuff like that, right? And when you kind of like look at baseball through a science lens, which I did because I was playing at the time while taking these classes, I realized that what my coaches were teaching, when you like looked at it through a science lens, it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. So my motivation to do what I do was based on the fact that I thought that a lot of players were kind of getting cheated because the information that they were getting, it wasn't actually helping them, because when you applied physics, it didn't make sense. So physics is undefeated and stuff, right? Just because you're on a baseball field, if you shoot a bow and arrow on a baseball field and you shoot it at whatever angle, it's still going to go the distance that, the speed of the arrow kind of like projects, and like based on like, wind and all that stuff. Just because you're on a baseball field, that stuff doesn't go away. So if you want to get the most hits, you want to consistently be able to hit the ball where the outfielders aren't or the infielders aren't, right? So you want to be able to hit the ball consistently over the infield, and the only way to do that is by manipulating the speed that someone hits it. So obviously the harder they hit it, the greater the probability that it lands over the infield, but also manipulating like the launch angle. So if you're teaching people how to hit the ball like flat and they don't hit the ball that hard, what ends up happening is the probability of a fielder getting it is way higher. So my thought behind the whole thing was that, okay, well, like obviously we want to get people to hit the ball as hard as we possibly can. So that's kind of like item 1, right? Then we want the probability that they hit the ball to be really, really high, which is item 2, right? And basically that's like swing plane and how long your bat's in the way of the ball, right? The final destination of a good pitch is the catcher's glove. So if your bat's in between the catcher's glove and the ball, then you maximize your chances of running into that ball. So in the third thing, which is I think something that's a little bit more like unique to what I teach versus like what other people teach. The third thing is minimizing the get in the way time. So that time between when my brain says, okay, Kurt, it's time to swing, and when your bat actually gets in between the catcher's glove and the ball, you want that to be the shortest time possible. So that way you can make a decision on a pitch as late as possible. So the most valuable commodity in baseball is time, right? So every time that like a scout goes to a game, they got their stopwatch, they're seeing how fast someone runs to first base, they got their radar gun, they see how hard someone throws. And the only reason that seeing how hard someone throws is really, really important is because it minimizes the time that a hitter has to make a decision. So it's not the velocity really that makes it hard for someone to hit. It's really the time that it takes for it to leave the hand to get to the catcher's glove that makes it difficult to hit. So and that's why, like, you know, you couldn't play like major league players on like a 45-foot field because the ball would get there too quick. People just like wouldn't really be able to hit it. But anyways, so those three things are the most important things in the swing. So when I started building like my swing model, everything that I did was governed by that. I always ask myself, like, does the thing that I'm teaching accomplish all three of those things? And if the answer was no, then I had to throw it out. So that's kind of how I built my swing model. And, you know, that's pretty much figured out now. And now it's a thing where, like, my greatest thing that I can do to really, like, improve and better myself is becoming better at communicating, which I think I've been working on really hard for the past, like, 2 years. But also just being better at program design. That way we can, like, develop practice routines so kids can really, like, program these things in. So I'm studying a lot of like habit development and, you know, like the psychology behind that and how that translates into you know, someone's ability to, like, take something and then, like, apply it into their, you know, real life, whether that be like just be it via like fast twitch muscles, or that be you know, like, how do I make sure that every day, like, I get up in the morning that I can, like, execute said task. So being able to do that as a hitter, like, you know, being able to be consistent with your routine, you know, having your swing satisfy all three of those parameters, right? Maximize or minimizing getting in the way time, maximizing force, and maximizing the time that your bat's in the way of the ball. And then the third most important thing, well, I guess like fifth if you want to think about it that way. Okay, Kaylee, come on, please move. Kaylee, okay. So the third most important thing really is your self-confidence. Hitting is a game that can really, or baseball and softball is a game that can really, really mess with your confidence all the time, because you could have, you know, a 5-for-5 performance, and the next night, you know, still feel like you're swinging it really well and go 0 for 5. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing anything wrong. It just means that you hit the ball and they fielded it, or, like, you know, you guessed wrong on a couple pitches or something. So you have to really be unwavering in your self-confidence. So those are some things that I kind of want you to think about today. Just, you know, when you're going about, like, your daily life and thinking about, you know, how you can get better at baseball. So Kurt Hughes, Ignite Baseball, you know, looking forward to talking to you tomorrow.